I never thought owning an aircraft hangar in Scottsdale, Arizona, would turn into a legal nightmare. But here I am, staring at security camera footage of a middle-aged woman with a blonde bob haircut letting herself into my private property for the fourth time this month. My name is Quincy Ashford, and I'm a commercial pilot for Southwest Airlines. After years of saving and working overtime flights, I finally bought my dream property 3 years ago. A modest house with an aircraft hangar on 2 acres, just outside the main residential area of Desert Vista Estates. The hangar houses my pride and joy, a beautifully restored 1978 Cessna 172 that I spent 5 years rebuilding from the ground up. The property is technically within the HOA boundaries, but it's zoned differently because of the hangar, something the previous owner fought hard to establish back in 2010. The HOA has jurisdiction over the house and front yard, but the hangar and runway area are explicitly excluded from their rules, a fact clearly stated in my property deed. Everything was peaceful until 6 months ago, when the HOA elected a new president. Her name is Brenda Morrison, a 52-year-old former real estate agent who apparently retired early and decided that micromanaging the neighborhood would be her new career. Within her first week, she sent violation notices to 8 different homeowners for infractions ranging from mailbox colors to children's basketball hoops being 3 inches too far into the driveway. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in late March. I was doing my pre-flight check on the Cessna when I heard a car pull up outside the hangar. The large rolling door was open because I was planning to take the plane up for some touch and go practice at the nearby municipal airport. Brenda stepped out of her white Lexus SUV, clipboard in hand, wearing what I would come to recognize as her uniform. A pastel cardigan, pressed khaki pants, and an expression that suggested she smelled something unpleasant. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp and carrying across the hangar. "I need to speak with you about this structure." I climbed down from the wing and wiped my hands on a rag. "Good morning. I'm Quincy Ashford. Can I help you? I'm Brenda Morrison, HOA president." She didn't offer her hand, just clutched her clipboard tighter. "I'm conducting an assessment of all properties in Desert Vista Estates, and I have several concerns about this hangar." "What kind of concerns?" I asked, keeping my tone friendly but wary. "For starters, it's an eyesore. The metal exterior doesn't match the aesthetic standards of our community. Second, the noise from aircraft operations disturbs residents. Third, I've noticed you sometimes have friends over who park their vehicles near the hangar, and we have strict guest parking regulations." I took a deep breath. "Mrs. Morrison, this hangar is grandfathered in and specifically excluded from HOA architectural guidelines. It's in my property deed and was approved by the county 15 years before I bought the place. As for noise, I only fly during daylight hours and well within FAA regulations. And my friends parking on my own property has nothing to do with the HOA." Her jaw tightened. "Everything within Desert Vista Estates falls under HOA purview, Mr. Ashford. I'll be reviewing your deed personally, and you can expect a formal notice within the week." She left without another word, her Lexus kicking up dust as she drove away. I should have known then that this was just the beginning. The formal notice arrived 5 days later, certified mail. It demanded I submit architectural modification plans for the hangar, pay a retroactive annual fee of $1,500 for commercial structure maintenance, and limit my flying to weekends only. The letter cited various HOA bylaws, none of which actually applied to my property. I spent that evening drafting a detailed response with copies of my deed, the county zoning documents, and a letter from my real estate attorney explaining that the HOA had zero authority over the hangar. I sent the response via certified mail and thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, I drove to my hangar around 8 to do some routine maintenance. The padlock on the side entrance was unlocked, and the door was slightly ajar. My heart rate spiked. The hangar contained not just my aircraft, but also expensive tools, avionics equipment, and aircraft parts worth tens of thousands of dollars. I pushed the door open carefully, half expecting to find thieves ransacking the place. Instead, I found Brenda Morrison standing in the middle of my hangar, talking on her phone and examining my Cessna like she was conducting an inspection. "What are you doing in here?" I demanded, my voice echoing in the metal space. She barely glanced at me, holding up one finger in a wait gesture while she finished her call. "Yes, I'll send you those photos. Talk soon." She hung up and turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Ashford, I'm conducting the property assessment I mentioned." "You're trespassing. This is private property and you have no right to be here. As HOA president, I have every right to inspect properties within our community to ensure compliance with our standards. Not this property, not this structure." I pulled out my phone. "You need to leave now or I'm calling the police." She laughed, actually laughed. "Don't be dramatic. I'm simply doing my job. However, now that I'm here, I can see this aircraft isn't properly registered. The tail number is visible, but I see no current inspection stickers. The annual inspection was completed last month, and all documentation is properly filed with the FAA. You have no idea what you're talking about, and more importantly, you're trespassing. Leave. Now." Brenda's expression shifted from amused to cold. "You're being very uncooperative, Mr. Ashford. This attitude will be noted in my report." She walked past me toward the door, then paused. "By the way, I let myself in with the HOA master key. We have access to all structures on HOA property for emergency inspections." "You don't have a master key to my hangar because this isn't HOA property. How did you actually get in?" She didn't answer, just got in her Lexus and drove away. I immediately checked all the locks. The side door's padlock showed scratches around the keyhole, fresh ones. She'd picked the lock or had someone do it for her. I spent the rest of the day installing a camera system with motion alerts that would send notifications directly to my phone. 4 cameras covering all entrances, all recording to a cloud storage system. If she came back, I'd have proof. That evening, I called my attorney, Marcus Chen, and explained the situation. He listened carefully, then let out a long sigh. "Quincy, I'm going to be straight with you. This woman sounds like a nightmare, but unless you have proof she entered without permission, it's your word against hers. She'll claim she had reason to believe she had access rights. So what do I do? Document everything. Those cameras are a good start. If she trespasses again, call the police immediately and file a report. After that, we can pursue a restraining order if needed. Also, I'll draft a cease and desist letter to her and the HOA board explaining the legal boundaries of their authority." The cease and desist letter was sent on Monday. Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the hangar cameras. I was at the grocery store, but I pulled up the live feed immediately. Brenda's Lexus was parked outside and she was at the side door again. This time she had a key, an actual key, and she was unlocking my new padlock. I felt my blood pressure spike. She'd somehow gotten a copy made or picked it again. I immediately called the police while watching the feed as she entered my hangar. "Scottsdale Police, what's your emergency? I have an active trespasser on my property." I'm watching her on security cameras entering my aircraft hangar without permission. The dispatcher took my information and address. Officers are en route. Are you at the location? No, I'm about 15 minutes away, but I can see her on live camera feed. She's the HOA president, and this is her second time trespassing. Do not confront her yourself, sir. Let the officers handle it. I drove home faster than I should have, parking at my house and then running down the path to the hangar. A police cruiser was already there, and I could see two officers talking to Brenda outside the hangar. She was gesturing animatedly, her face flushed. Mr. Ashford, one of the officers, a tall woman with sergeant stripes, asked as I approached. That's me. This is my property. I'm Sergeant Patricia Reeves. This woman claims she's the HOA president and has a right to inspect this structure. She's lying. The hangar is explicitly excluded from HOA authority. I have documentation, and this is her second time breaking into my property. I have video of both incidents. Brenda jumped in. That's absurd. I have every right as HOA president to ensure community standards are maintained. This hangar is an unauthorized structure that Mrs. Morrison, Sergeant Reeves interrupted. Do you have written authorization from Mr. Ashford to be on this property? I don't need authorization. The HOA bylaws. That's not what I asked. Do you have permission from the property owner? Brenda's mouth snapped shut, her eyes blazing. I pulled out my phone and showed the sergeant the video footage from both incidents. This is from today, and I have footage from 2 weeks ago as well. She's picked the locks or had copies made without my authorization. The sergeant watched the videos, her expression growing more serious. Mrs. Morrison, how did you gain entry to this building? I told you, I'm the HOA president. I was given keys to all community structures when I took office. You have documentation showing you have legal access to this specific building, Brenda faltered. It's within the community boundaries. That's all the documentation I need. Sergeant Reeves looked at me. Mr. Ashford, do you want to press charges? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to end this right there, but another part worried about escalating the situation further. I want her warned officially. If she comes back again, yes, I'll press charges. The sergeant turned back to Brenda. Mrs. Morrison, you're being officially warned that you do not have permission to enter this property. If you return without explicit written permission from Mr. Ashford, you will be arrested for criminal trespassing. Do you understand? Brenda's face had gone from flushed to pale. This is ridiculous. I'm performing my duties as, do you understand? The sergeant repeated, her tone brooking no argument. Yes, Brenda spat. After the police left, I changed all the locks again, this time to high security models that couldn't be easily picked. I also added a chain and secondary bolt lock to the main hangar door. I sent Marcus Chen all the video footage and the police report number. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. No more trespassing, no more letters from the HOA. I started to think maybe Brenda had finally backed off. I should have known better. In late April, I got a call from my neighbor 2 houses down, an elderly man named Robert Chen who'd lived in Desert Vista Estates for 20 years. He wasn't related to my attorney, despite the shared last name. Quincy, I thought you should know something, Robert said, his voice concerned. Brenda came to my door yesterday asking questions about your hangar. She wanted to know if the noise bothered me, if I'd seen you having parties there, things like that. She's going door to door trying to build a case against you. What did you tell her? I told her the truth. You're a quiet neighbor, you keep reasonable hours, and your plane is no louder than a lawnmower when you fly it. But she's talking to everyone, Quincy. She's determined to shut you down. I thanked Robert and immediately called Marcus. She's building a harassment case, he said. Trying to get neighbors to complain so she can claim community disruption. We need to be proactive. I'm going to file a restraining order request based on the trespassing incidents and this pattern of harassment. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for mid-May. In the meantime, I continued my normal routine, flying twice a week, maintaining my plane, and trying to ignore the dirty looks Brenda gave me whenever our paths crossed at the community mailbox area. 2 days before the hearing, my motion alert went off again. It was 9 at night, well after dark. I was at home, just finishing dinner when I saw Brenda's Lexus pull up to the hangar. She wasn't alone this time. A man I didn't recognize was with her, and they were both approaching the side door. I grabbed my phone and immediately called 911 while running toward the hangar. This is Quincy Ashford at 47,250 East Desert Vista Road. I have trespassers breaking into my aircraft hangar. This is the 3rd incident with the same woman. I have police reports on file. Officers are dispatched, sir. Please stay on the line and do not approach the suspects. But I was already halfway there, and I could see flashlight beams inside the hangar through the window. I stopped about 30 feet away and started recording video on my phone while staying on the line with the dispatcher. They're inside the structure, I told the dispatcher. I can see flashlights. 2 people, 1 female, 1 male. The police arrived within minutes, 3 cruisers this time. Sergeant Reeves was among them again, and she recognized me immediately. Mr. Ashford, is this the same individual from the previous incidents? Yes, Brenda Morrison, HOA president, and she brought someone with her this time. The officers approached the hangar with their lights on. This is the Scottsdale police. Exit the building with your hands visible. There was a long pause, then Brenda and the man emerged. He was in his 30s, wearing a polo shirt with a logo I couldn't quite make out in the dark. Mrs. Morrison, Sergeant Reeves said, and I could hear the frustration in her voice. We spoke about this. You were explicitly warned not to return to this property. I hired a licensed building inspector, Brenda said, her voice shrill. We have every right to ensure this structure meets safety codes. The man spoke up. I'm Donald Pierce, certified building inspector. Mrs. Morrison hired me to assess this hangar for code violations. Did Mr. Ashford hire you? The sergeant asked. No, but as HOA president, Mrs. Morrison has the authority to. She has no such authority over this building, I interrupted, pulling out my phone to show them the same documentation I'd shown before. This property is excluded from HOA jurisdiction. This is straight-up criminal trespassing, and I'm pressing charges this time. Sergeant Reeves looked at Brenda. Mrs. Morrison, you were given an official warning. I have no choice but to place you under arrest for criminal trespassing. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. The color drained from Brenda's face. You can't be serious. I'm the HOA president. I'm protecting the community. Madam, turn around now. I watched as the sergeant handcuffed Brenda and read her rights. The building inspector, Donald Pierce, was also detained for questioning, though he wasn't arrested since he claimed he didn't know he was trespassing illegally. Another officer took my statement and collected the video footage from my phone and the security cameras. We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to file a formal report and sign the complaint, he told me. After they took Brenda away in the cruiser, I stood in the quiet darkness outside my hangar, my hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. This had escalated way beyond what I'd ever imagined when I bought this property. The next morning, I went to the police station and spent 2 hours filing paperwork and giving a detailed statement about all 3 trespassing incidents. The officer handling my case, Detective James Morrison, no relation to Brenda, thankfully, was thorough and professional. Mr. Ashford, I want you to understand the process here, he explained. Mrs. Morrison was released on bond last night. There will be a court date set, probably in about 6 weeks. In the meantime, as part of her bond conditions, she's prohibited from coming within 500 feet of your property. If she violates that, call us immediately. What about the restraining order hearing in 3 days? That still goes forward. In fact, this arrest strengthens your case considerably. The restraining order hearing was almost anticlimactic. Brenda didn't show up, sending an attorney instead who argued that she was simply trying to fulfill her duties as HOA president. Marcus Chen destroyed that argument with documentation, video evidence, police reports, and testimony about the pattern of harassment. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Sandra Hamilton, granted a temporary restraining order immediately. Mrs. Morrison is to have no contact with Mr. Ashford and is prohibited from entering his property or the area around his aircraft hangar. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place pending the criminal trial. Walking out of the courthouse, Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. That went as well as it could have. Now we wait for the criminal case. But the HOA wasn't done yet. A week after the restraining order was granted, I received a letter from the Desert Vista Estates HOA board. It informed me that there would be an emergency meeting to discuss ongoing community disruption and safety concerns related to aircraft operations. I showed the letter to Marcus. Can they do this? They can hold a meeting about anything they want. The question is whether they can actually take any action against you. Let's attend and see what they are up to. The meeting was held on a Thursday evening at the community center, a small building near the Desert Vista Estates entrance. When Marcus and I arrived, the parking lot was surprisingly full. Inside, about 40 residents were seated in folding chairs facing a table where 5 board members sat. Brenda's chair was conspicuously empty. The board president pro tempore, a nervous-looking man in his 40s named Gregory Walsh, called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. We're here to discuss concerns that have been raised about aircraft operations within our community and the recent incidents involving our former board president, Brenda Morrison. Former board president. That was new, Gregory continued. The board has reviewed the situation carefully, and we want to be clear. The aircraft hangar on Mr. Ashford's property is not under HOA jurisdiction. We've reviewed the property deeds and consulted with our attorney. Mrs. Morrison exceeded her authority, and the board does not support her actions. I felt tension I didn't know I was carrying start to release from my shoulders. However, Gregory went on, we do want to address community concerns about noise and safety. Mr. Ashford, would you be willing to speak to those concerns? Marcus nodded to me and I stood up. About 40 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some curious, some hostile. I'm Quincy Ashford. I've lived here for 3 years and I've been flying for 15 years as a commercial airline pilot. My Cessna 172 is maintained to the highest standards and regularly inspected. I only fly during daylight hours, typically between 9 in the morning and 6 in the evening, never more than twice a week. The noise level is comparable to a riding lawnmower at the same distance. I'm happy to answer any specific questions. An older woman in the 3rd row raised her hand. How low do you fly over the neighborhood? I don't fly over the residential area at all. My runway points east toward open land, and I climb to at least 1,000 feet before turning north toward the municipal airport. The flight path is designed to avoid homes. A man in the back called out, "What about fuel storage? Is that safe?" I keep minimal fuel on site, less than 50 gallons, stored in approved aviation fuel containers in a ventilated area. It's all within county fire code regulations. More questions came, and I answered each one as thoroughly and honestly as I could. Marcus backed me up with the legal documentation. By the end of the meeting, the mood had shifted considerably. Several residents came up afterward to apologize for the harassment I'd experienced and to express interest in the plane. One even asked if I ever gave flying lessons. Robert Chen, my neighbor who'd warned me about Brenda's door-to-door campaign, shook my hand. "You handled that well. Most of us had no idea Brenda was doing what she did. She told the board she was just conducting routine inspections." "What happened to make her the former president?" I asked. Gregory Walsh, the pro tempore president, overheard the question. "She resigned 2 days after her arrest. The board asked for her resignation and she gave it. We're holding elections next month for a permanent replacement." Driving home that night, I felt cautiously optimistic for the first time in months. The criminal trial was still ahead, but at least the HOA situation seemed to be resolved. The criminal trial was scheduled for late June, about 8 weeks after the arrest. In the meantime, life started returning to normal. I flew my Cessna without incident, went to work, and even started dating someone I'd met through friends, a teacher named Lisa Romano who thought the whole HOA saga was both horrifying and hilarious. "I mean, who breaks into someone's airplane hangar?" she said over dinner one night. "What did she think she was going to accomplish?" "Control," I said. "Some people need to feel like they're in charge of everything around them." 2 weeks before the trial, Marcus called with news. Brenda's attorney reached out about a plea deal. She's willing to plead guilty to misdemeanor trespassing in exchange for probation and dropping the criminal trespassing charge. What's the difference? Criminal trespassing is a more serious charge with potential jail time. Misdemeanor trespassing means a fine, probation, and a criminal record, but no jail time. It's up to you whether to accept. I thought about it for a long moment. What do you recommend? Honestly, take the deal. You'll get restitution for the locks and security system she forced you to buy. She'll have a criminal record and you avoid the uncertainty of trial. Plus, the probation terms will keep her away from you. Okay, let's do it. The plea hearing was short. Brenda stood before Judge Hamilton looking diminished somehow. Her blonde bob less perfectly styled, her cardigan wrinkled. She pleaded guilty to misdemeanor criminal trespassing, and the judge sentenced her to 2 years of probation, a $5,000 fine, community service, and an order to pay restitution for my security system and lock changes, which totaled about $3,000. "Mrs. Morrison," Judge Hamilton said, looking at her over reading glasses, "I want to be very clear. If you violate the terms of your probation in any way, including coming within 500 feet of Mr. Ashford or his property, you will serve the maximum jail sentence for this offense. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Brenda said quietly. As we left the courtroom, Marcus turned to me. "It's over. She's done." But there was one more piece to resolve. 3 days after the plea hearing, I received a letter from Desert Vista Estates HOA. Inside was a formal apology from the board for Brenda Morrison's actions, a check reimbursing me for all the legal fees I'd paid to Marcus Chen, nearly $8,000, and an invitation to join the board as the liaison for properties with special zoning considerations. I called Gregory Walsh. "I appreciate the apology and the reimbursement, but I'm not interested in joining the board." "I understand," he said, "but if you ever change your mind, the offer stands. We want to make this right, Quincy." What Brenda did was way out of line, and the board should have caught it sooner. In July, Lisa and I took the Cessna up for a sunset flight over the Sonoran Desert, the mountains turning purple and gold in the fading light. She'd been nervous about small planes before, but after I'd taken her through every safety feature and let her handle the controls during straight and level flight, she'd started to enjoy it. So whatever happened to that building inspector she brought with her? Lisa asked through the headset as we flew north towards Sedona. Donald Pierce. Turns out he lost his license for conducting unauthorized inspections. Brenda told him she had owner permission, so he thought it was legitimate. He sued her for damaging his reputation. Karma, Lisa said with satisfaction. Pretty much. A month later, I ran into Brenda at a grocery store in Scottsdale. She was in the produce section, and I saw her before she saw me. For a moment, I considered turning around and going a different direction, but I decided against it. I wasn't going to let her make me feel uncomfortable in public spaces. She looked up as I walked past, and our eyes met. I nodded politely and kept walking. She didn't say anything, just turned back to the vegetables, her face flushed. Later that evening, I told Lisa about the encounter. "How did you feel?" she asked. Honestly, nothing. Maybe a little sad for her. She destroyed her own life over something that had nothing to do with her. That's very mature of you. I don't know about mature. I'm just tired of being angry about it. In August, the HOA held their election for permanent board president. A retired engineer named Patricia Hernandez won, and one of her first acts was to send a letter to every property owner clarifying the exact boundaries of HOA authority and promising transparent, respectful governance. She also eliminated several of Brenda's more draconian rules about mailbox colors and decorative plants. Robert Chen told me that Brenda had put her house up for sale. "She's moving to Tucson," I heard. "Wants a fresh start." "Can't say I blame her," I replied. Life in Desert Vista Estates settled into a comfortable rhythm. I continued flying twice a week, weather permitting. Several neighbors asked if they could see the Cessna up close, and I started hosting occasional open hangar days where anyone interested could come look at the plane, ask questions, and learn about general aviation. It turned out that most people were fascinated by the idea of building and maintaining your own aircraft. One Saturday in September, a kid from 3 streets over, maybe 12 years old, came to one of these open hangar events with his dad. The boy's name was Tyler, and his eyes lit up when he saw the Cessna. "Is it hard to learn to fly?" he asked. "It takes work and dedication, but it's absolutely worth it," I told him. "If you're serious about it, you can start flight lessons at 16. "Really?" His father looked interested too. "I didn't know they could start that young. Solo at 16, private pilot license at 17. If Tyler's interested, there are also youth aviation programs where he can learn the basics before he's old enough for actual lessons." I gave them information about the local Civil Air Patrol Squadron and the Experimental Aircraft Association's Young Eagles program. Tyler left with a stack of brochures and a model airplane kit I'd built years ago and never assembled. 2 weeks later, Tyler's father called to thank me. He hasn't stopped talking about flying since that day. We signed him up for the Civil Air Patrol, and he's already reading everything he can get his hands on about aviation. That call made everything I'd gone through with Brenda feel worth it. If I'd let her shut me down, sold the plane, given up the hangar, that kid might never have discovered his passion for flying. In October, Lisa and I celebrated our 6-month anniversary with a flight to Sedona, landing at the small airport there, and having dinner at a restaurant with views of the Red Rocks. On the flight back to Scottsdale, as the sun set and the first stars appeared, she said, "I've been thinking about taking flying lessons myself." "Really?" I glanced over at her in surprise. "Yeah, watching you fly, seeing how much you love it, it makes me want to experience it too. Not just as a passenger, but actually learning to do it." I think that's awesome. I know a great flight instructor at the municipal airport. I was hoping maybe you could teach me. I considered it. Let's do it this way. I'll teach you the basics, but you should also work with a certified instructor. It's better to learn from someone who isn't emotionally involved. Deal. By November, Lisa was taking lessons twice a week, and I was amazed at how naturally she took to it. She had good situational awareness and steady hands on the controls. Her instructor said she was progressing faster than most students around Thanksgiving. I was doing maintenance on the Cessna when Gregory Walsh stopped by. "Hey, Quincy, got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" "The board wanted me to let you know that Brenda Morrison completed her community service and moved to Tucson last week. Her probation transferred down there. I thought you'd want to know she's gone. Thanks for letting me know. Also, we're putting together a community directory with emergency contacts and special resources. Would you be willing to be listed as someone with aircraft access in case there's ever a medical emergency or search and rescue situation?" "Absolutely. Happy to help however I can." That December, there was a hiking emergency in the Superstition Mountains east of Phoenix. A teenage boy had gotten separated from his group as evening fell, and search and rescue was having trouble covering all the terrain before dark. I got a call from the local volunteer coordinator asking if I could assist with aerial spotting. I had the Cessna in the air within 30 minutes, coordinating with search and rescue on their frequency. The boy was found about 40 minutes into the search, thanks in part to my spotting him near a dry creek bed. He was cold and scared but uninjured. The story made the local news, and suddenly, I had neighbors I'd never met stopping by to thank me. The HOA board sent a letter of appreciation. Tyler's dad brought over a pie his wife had baked. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. Christmas that year was peaceful. Lisa and I hosted a small party at my house, and several neighbors came, including Robert Chen and his wife, Gregory Walsh, and even Patricia Hernandez, the HOA president. We stood outside near the hangar, drinking hot chocolate and looking at the stars, and someone asked me to tell the story about Brenda Morrison. "I'd rather not," I said. "That chapter's closed. I'm more interested in the good things happening now." But later, when it was just Lisa and me cleaning up after everyone had left, she asked, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd just given in to her demands?" "Sometimes. I'd probably have sold the plane, closed up the hangar, maybe even moved. But I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. This place, this plane, it's not just a hobby. It's part of who I am. I'm glad you fought for it. Me too." In January, exactly 9 months after the plea hearing, I received a final piece of mail related to the whole situation. It was a check from Brenda Morrison for the full restitution amount, plus interest. There was no note, no apology, just the check. I deposited it and used the money to upgrade the avionics in the Cessna and to buy new tools for the hangar. Every time I used that equipment, I thought about how something negative had ultimately led to something positive. Lisa soloed in February, just 4 months after starting lessons. I wasn't there for the actual solo because her instructor wanted to avoid any pressure or distraction, but I was waiting when she landed, and the grin on her face when she climbed out of the training plane was something I'll never forget. "I did it," she shouted, running over to hug me. "I actually flew by myself. I knew you could." That evening, we went up together in my Cessna, and for the first time, I let her fly from the left seat while I rode right seat as safety pilot. She handled the plane with confidence, her fear from those early flights completely gone. In March, a year after this whole saga started, the Desert Vista Estates HOA held their annual meeting. Patricia Hernandez gave a report on the community's status, highlighting increased transparency, reduced violation notices by 70%, and improved neighbor relations. She specifically mentioned the success of community events like the open hangar days I'd been hosting. "We've learned that our community is stronger when we respect each other's differences and support each other's passions," she said. "Last year's challenges taught us important lessons about the limits of authority and the importance of clear communication." It was as close to a public acknowledgement of the Brenda Morrison situation as the board would probably ever make, and I appreciated the diplomatic way Patricia handled it. After the meeting, a woman I didn't recognize approached me. She was probably in her 30s, professionally dressed with kind eyes. "Mr. Ashford, I'm Jennifer Morrison, Brenda's daughter." My stomach tightened. "Hello. I wanted to apologize for what my mother put you through. I only found out about everything a few months ago. She didn't tell me until after she moved to Tucson. You don't need to apologize for her actions. I know, but I wanted you to understand that she's getting help. She's seeing a therapist, dealing with some control issues that have been problems her whole life. What happened here was a wake-up call for her. I hope the therapy helps," I said sincerely. "She asked me to tell you she's sorry. She's too ashamed to reach out directly, but she wanted you to know. I appreciate you telling me, and I hope she finds peace." Jennifer smiled sadly. "Thank you for being gracious. Not everyone would be after what she did." After she left, Lisa asked, "How do you feel?" "Honestly, relieved. I think I needed to hear that she acknowledged what she did was wrong. It closes the loop, you know." "I do." Spring arrived with perfect flying weather, cool mornings and clear skies. Lisa continued her training, working toward her private pilot license. Tyler, the kid who'd come to the open hangar day, was excelling in civil air patrol and had already taken his first Young Eagles flight. He stopped by regularly to ask questions and help with basic maintenance tasks, and I started thinking about offering a scholarship for his flight training when he turned 16. In April, I got a promotion at Southwest Airlines, moving from line pilot to check airman, which meant I'd be training and evaluating other pilots. The promotion came with a significant raise, and I decided to use some of the money to expand the hangar and add a small workshop area for aviation projects. The HOA board approved the expansion without any issues, and Patricia Hernandez even came by to see the plans and offer her congratulations. The contrast between her supportive approach and Brenda's hostile one couldn't have been more stark. By May, the hangar expansion was complete. I hosted a community barbecue to celebrate, and more than 60 people showed up. Kids ran around the open hangar, adults examined the Cessna, and everyone seemed genuinely happy to be there. Robert Chen gave a toast thanking me for being a good neighbor, and several people mentioned how the open hangar days had become one of their favorite community events. Standing there surrounded by neighbors and friends, watching Tyler explain the basics of flight controls to a group of younger kids, seeing Lisa confident and happy in the world of aviation I loved, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The fight with Brenda Morrison had been stressful and expensive and time-consuming, but it had forced me to engage with my community in ways I never would have otherwise. I'd stood my ground, protected my rights, and in doing so, had become a better neighbor and community member. The hangar was no longer just my private space. It had become a place where people could learn, dream, and imagine possibilities. That evening, after everyone had left and Lisa and I were sitting on the hood of my truck watching the sunset, she said, "You know what's amazing? A year ago, you were dealing with Brenda breaking into your hangar, and now you're hosting community events here. That's quite a transformation." "I guess it is. I never wanted to be some kind of community figure. I just wanted to be left alone to fly my plane. But isn't this better? I thought about it, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. Yeah, it really is. In June, Lisa passed her private pilot check ride on the first attempt. We celebrated by flying to Flagstaff for the weekend, two pilots sharing the flying duties, equals in the cockpit. During the flight, she brought up something that had been on both our minds. "I've been thinking about moving in together," she said. "Me too. Your place or mine? Yours has the hangar," she pointed out with a smile. Fair point. We landed in Flagstaff as the sun set, and that night over dinner, we made plans for the future. She'd move in at the end of the school year. We'd split the costs of a seaplane rating we both wanted to get. Maybe in a year or two, we'd look at buying a second plane, something aerobatic and fun. The future looked bright, full of possibilities, and completely different from the dark, stressful place I'd been in when Brenda Morrison was breaking into my hangar and trying to control my life. July brought monsoon season, and with it, dramatic storms and spectacular flying weather in between. Tyler turned 14 and started working part-time at the municipal airport, saving money for future flight training. I set up a scholarship fund with contributions from some of the neighbors who'd attended the hangar events, enough to pay for at least half of his private pilot training when he was old enough. In August, I got a call from Jennifer Morrison again. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out," she said. "But I thought you'd want to know that my mother completed her probation successfully. She's doing much better. She's even started volunteering at a community garden in Tucson, something she can pour her organizational energy into in a positive way." "That's great to hear. Thanks for letting me know." She also wanted me to tell you that she watches the Desert Vista Estates community Facebook page sometimes, and she saw the posts about your hangar events and the scholarship fund for that young man. She said to tell you that you've done good things with a bad situation. After hanging up, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't known I needed. Brenda had made terrible choices, violated my rights, and created enormous stress in my life. But she'd taken responsibility, completed her sentence, and was apparently working to be a better person. I could respect that journey even if I never wanted to see her again. In September, Lisa and I flew to California for a weekend beach trip, leaving from my hangar in Scottsdale and landing at a small coastal airport near Santa Barbara. It was our first real cross-country trip together, as both of us being pilots, and we traded off flying legs and navigation duties. The partnership felt natural and right, both in the plane and in life. On the way back, as we crossed the Colorado River and entered Arizona airspace, I looked over at Lisa in the right seat, then down at the desert landscape below us, and felt a profound sense of contentment. Everything I'd fought for, stood up for, and protected had led to this moment. When we landed back at my hangar that evening, the sun setting over the mountains, Patricia Hernandez was waiting with a few other neighbors. They'd organized a small welcome-back gathering with food and drinks, just a spontaneous community moment. "We saw your flight tracking said you were coming home," Patricia explained. "Thought we'd surprise you." Standing there in the golden evening light, surrounded by friends and neighbors, the hangar behind me and the plane I loved secured for the night, I realized something important. Brenda Morrison had tried to take away my freedom, my passion, my property rights. She'd broken the law, harassed me, and made my life difficult. But in fighting back and standing firm for what was right, I'd gained something far more valuable than just keeping my hangar. I'd built a community. I'd inspired a kid to chase his dreams. I'd helped Lisa discover a passion she never knew she had. I'd become someone my neighbors could count on, someone who'd use his resources to help others when they needed it. Brenda had tried to use my aircraft hangar free, treating it like it was hers to control and access whenever she wanted. She'd ignored warnings, violated court orders, and ultimately paid the price with a criminal record and forced relocation. But her actions, as negative as they were, had catalyzed something positive. The hangar was no longer just mine. It was a community resource, a place of learning and inspiration, a symbol of what happens when you stand up for your rights while remaining open to connection with others. As everyone gathered around to hear stories about our California trip, and Tyler peppered us with questions about coastal flying conditions, and Robert Chen made jokes about needing senior citizen flight lessons, I caught Lisa's eye. She smiled, understanding without words what I was feeling. We'd won. Not just the legal battle against Brenda Morrison, but something bigger. We'd won the right to live authentically, to pursue our passions, and to share those passions with others. We'd turned a property dispute into a community asset, transformed harassment into opportunity, and converted legal troubles into lasting friendships. The fourth warning I'd given Brenda, the one that led to her arrest, had seemed like an ending at the time. But really, it had been a beginning. The beginning of setting proper boundaries, of standing up for what was right, and of discovering that sometimes the hardest fights lead to the best outcomes. As the evening wore on and the stars came out above the Sonoran Desert, I stood near my hangar with a glass of wine, watching my neighbors laugh and talk, watching Lisa demonstrate hand signals for aerobatic maneuvers to an enthusiastic group, watching Tyler explain the principles of lift to some younger kids, and I felt a deep, abiding satisfaction. My aircraft hangar stood secure, properly locked, under my control, and yet more open and accessible to my community than it had ever been when I was just trying to keep it private. The locks were stronger now, but the doors opened wider and more often, on my terms, for purposes I chose, benefiting people I cared about. Brenda Morrison had learned an expensive lesson about respecting other people's property and rights. I'd learned something too, that defending what's yours doesn't mean closing yourself off from others. It means establishing the boundaries that allow you to engage with your community from a position of security and choice, rather than fear and compulsion. The Desert Vista Estates, HOA, had learned as well, transforming from an organization that tried to micromanage every detail into one that respected individual property rights while fostering genuine community connection. Patricia Hernandez's leadership had been crucial in that transformation, but the catalyst had been Brenda's overreach and the community's rejection of that approach. In the end, everyone had grown from the experience. Even Brenda, from what Jennifer said, had used it as an opportunity for personal development and change. That didn't excuse what she'd done, but it meant the negative situation had ultimately pushed everyone toward being better versions of themselves. As the gathering wound down and people started heading home, Lisa and I walked around the hangar one last time, checking that everything was secured for the night. The Cessna sat quietly inside, ready for the next flight, the next adventure, the next opportunity to share the magic of aviation with someone who'd never experienced it. "You know what I love about this place," Lisa said, looking around the hangar. "What's that?" "It represents freedom. Not just the freedom to fly, but freedom to be yourself, to stand up for what's right, to build something meaningful. Brenda tried to take that away, and instead, you turned it into something even better." I pulled her close, breathing in the familiar smells of aviation fuel and metal and desert air. "We turned it into something better. I couldn't have done any of this without your support." "Partners," she said. "Partners," I agreed. We locked up the hangar and walked back to the house, hand in hand under the stars. Tomorrow would bring new flights, new students, new opportunities to share this passion with others. But tonight, I was content with what we'd built, what we'd protected, and what we'd become. The story of Karen trying to use my aircraft hangar free, of giving her 4 warnings and finally having her arrested for trespassing, could have been just a bitter tale of conflict and legal trouble. Instead, it had become a story of community, growth, redemption, and the power of standing firm for your rights while remaining open to connection and growth. And that, in the end, was the best possible outcome I could have hoped for.